Hey, what's up? I'm Ryan Conroy with Experience Gear, and today we're looking at the Transition Sentinel, the first generation, the V1. So you might be asking yourself, how's this thing stack up? Well, we'll get there. You're going a little fast. But what we got is a bike that was released originally in 2018 as part of the Speed Balanced Geometry, SBG, lineup with Transition, which was also part of their Giddy Up 2.0, which basically was their second iteration of their FSR suspension package, moving from a single pivot to a more vertical system. The SBG that they were working on did a lot with increasing the seat tube angle, increasing the reach, and decreasing the head tube angle to allow for better better handling characteristics and more stability overall. What did that result in? It resulted in this thing. This was the first bike that they actually released with that geometry, to my knowledge, and they were pretty progressive on the geometry, even for the time. There are other companies that did this previously, notably Mondraker, Nikolai, and Geometron would be ones that would come to mind. But Transition was really the company that kind of brought this to the mass market in North America for the most part. So what did that result in? It did result in better stability. When I first got on this bike back in 2018, it was kind of a game changer. This was probably one of the bikes that actually, for me personally, was one of the biggest kind of increases in performance that I have noticed over time. So how does it handle compared to other bikes today? So climbing performance, this bike does have 140 millimeters of travel in the rear, 160 in the front. So it's kind of a modern, kind of longer travel trail bike, maybe considered an all-mountain bike. When it came out, they were kind of marketing it towards an aggressive all-mountain to almost enduro bike. Today, it definitely is not in that category. It is definitely not in the categories of enduro bikes. But instead, you need a sip of beer. You can consider this kind of in an all-mountain category pretty solidly. And for climbing at 140 millimeters, it doesn't climb the best. You're definitely going to be wanting to reach down for that climb switch, either to leave it into trail or fully locked out for smooth climbs like we have here in Western Washington. When you have chunkier climbs, maybe leaving it in the middle setting or even open. But if you are leaving it in the open, it does tend to wallow. This bike does not like to accelerate that much when you're pedaling, pumping, or things like that. So if you have kind of not overly aggressive terrain or kind of smooth climbs, probably not the best bike for you. Descending, this bike actually is pretty damn good. One of the key things that I have noticed is the DPX2 that shipped stock on most of these bikes was very much underperformed the grip damper that was put on later models. So the 2019 and 2020, the bike pretty much felt unbalanced with the DPX2. With the original 2018 launch, the higher end bikes did ship with a Fox RC2 damper. That bike did feel more balanced. But it's a lot more notable when you have a Grip 2 damper or even a grip damper up front that the rear shock is not performing as much. To the extent where there'd be multiple times where I'd be at the top of a descent, drop in, and on kind of chunkier bits, I would think that the suspension was locked out. Pull over, double check, it's actually fully open. What I ended up doing personally on my bike is I actually swapped out the DPX2 for a Float X2, a first generation, and that kind of made the bike perform notably better. In rough, chunkier sections, I felt like I could actually mock into them, didn't need to brake check or anything like that. Additionally, with the Speed Balanced Geometry, SBG geometry, I did notice how much faster I could go into corners and brake later because I knew that I would have traction throughout that corner, of getting really the body position over the front wheel to make sure that you do have traction through that entire process. So overall, it's a pretty solid bike. And if you're actually looking at other bikes that are comparable to it, even today, notably Stump Jumper Evo, the Norco Sight, as well as the Santa Cruz High Tower, the geometry on this bike is actually pretty darn close to ones that have come out this year, like brand new releases, which means that the geometry on this bike is still totally relevant. So minus the suspension package out back, if you were to upgrade that or even throw on a Cascade link, this bike is still pretty good. There's one kind of glaring issue with this bike, and that is tire clearance. The tire clearance on these second generation Giddy Up or SBG, jeez. Anyways, the tire clearance on those bikes are, it's pretty poor. Don't expect to run anything larger than say like a 2.4 without buzzing your seat stays or chain stays. And as such, you know, I've had rocks get stuck in cornering knobs and actually just go to town on the finish of my bike. So be cautious or conscious of what tires you're going to be running, how much clearance you have if you're going to run this bike. But yeah, I would say even today this is a great value. It holds its own against modern contenders, and Transition does an excellent job of maintaining not only kind of documentation, but also stocking replacement parts for it, whether that's bearings, pivot hardware. They even offer decal drawings, so you could actually make your own decals if you wanted to. So anyways, without further ado, I think we're going to wrap it up here. And yeah, for the full review, check out experiencegear.net. We've got a pretty in-depth history, background, as well as what we think about the bike. Thanks.